For today's watercolor tutorial, we'll actually be using a free printable that I have on my website. Visit the link in the show notes to download. The brush I'll be using today is this medium-sized brush with a pointy edge. We'll be using this navy-ish color and then this blue that's a slightly lighter shade. I'm going to start by getting my paintbrush wet in the water, and we're going to begin using our lighter blue shade for some of these details first. We're going to paint everything that we want to paint in this color, and then I'm going to use the navy blue once all of that is dry. First, we'll begin with our leopard print pumpkin. And leopard print is really kind of fun and surprisingly easy to paint. You actually just want to paint a bunch of irregular circles for this part. These will be sort of the center of the spots. And I want to make sure that I have a good amount of space between each dot. Oop, getting a little wet. There we go, I'll soak up some of this water. You want to make sure that you have a decent amount of space between each spot, and they should not all be perfect circles. Some of them might be oblong, some of them might be a little wiggly looking, and also just sort of changing up the size as well. We want some larger and some smaller. Now that that's done, we're going to skip this pumpkin because this next one is going to be sort of a navy shaded pumpkin. And we're going to go straight to the daisies. I love this little pattern. Now this one is going to be uniform round circles. I'm going to allow plenty of space in between them all. In hindsight, after designing, I wish I would have added a couple more up at the top, but just sort of allowing plenty of space around each circle. And we'll go in with the navy and we'll add the petals. Now this one is sort of an ombre glitter pattern. We're going to go and we're going to do lots of dots, and I'm just kind of dotting along and making everything look a little bit splotchy. I'm going to bring it up around the stem and then trace sort of the veins of the pumpkin. And I want this layer to be a little bit wider because over it I will go with the navy and a thinner pattern as well. this pumpkin is a nod to one of my favorite artists, Yayoi Kusama, and her famous pumpkins. But for these, we'll be doing alternating polka dots down the ridge of the pumpkin. So I'm going to start with this one farther out, and I'm going to do sort of equally sized and shaped circles all down the middle of that ridge. And we're going to skip because next time we go through it will be with the navy, and the alternating lines will be the navy dots. This one up here, let's do this one buffalo check. So I'm going to paint a grid pattern, and as you notice, I sort of trace for the vertical lines, I trace the ridges of the pumpkin. And this one's not quite as rounded, but we're going to make sort of a grid with the light blue color, fill in the light blue squares, and then when I come in with the navy, I'll fill in the dark blue squares. And then for the horizontal lines, I'm also just kind of going with the shape of the pumpkin. If you look at it, it's sort of rounded along the bottom, and we're going to sort of trace the roundness shape as we go across for the horizontal lines. Knowing too that if I were looking at the pumpkin in real life, it would be, the lines would kind of bump out a little bit where there were a larger ridge in the pumpkin, and then go in by the veins of the pumpkin. And then we're going to fill in alternating squares on this pumpkin. The top row I'll start with, and just sort of every other is going to be this light blue color, almost making a check-like pattern. And notice too that at the top you can really barely see the whole check. It's just sort of a little flash of blue coloring. And I'm just painting in the next row, the square that's in between the two that I've already painted. So we're just alternating going blue, white, blue, white, blue, white in a check pattern. Alright, here we go with our navy. Now to add the darker spots around my circles in the leopard pattern. For each spot, and it might help to actually pause and check out the model. I know, I'm sorry, this is not zoomed all the way in. But you're going to want to just take and do 2 or 3 irregular spots around each center that you've so far painted. this next guy, I'm just going to do sort of a wash of the navy blue color. So a lot of water, a little bit of paint. And I'm just going to spread it around all over inside of this. And now that I have got all of my paint on there, I'm going to take a lot of paint on my brush and I'm going to just add a little bit more value. I'm going to add a little bit more dark paint to sort of the shadows, the inner area where the stem would be, and some of the veins in between to give it more of a three-dimensional look. If you were looking at a pumpkin from head on, you'd also see that there's sort of a darker shadow at the bottom. And see how I'm kind of taking my brush and just spreading it a little bit up the pumpkin to blend it in. Now for my little daisies, I'm going to paint a petal around each of these, or paint petals around each of these centers. If I come to an area where it's close to the line, I'm just going to paint up to the line and not go over it. This makes it look like the pattern is continuing off the edge. It might be easier too, as you're painting these little daisies, these little petal hash marks, it might be easier for you to rotate your paper as well. Sometimes turning the paper when you're painting petals in a circular formation makes it easier for your wrist and your brain to work it out. One of my favorite patterns to paint is scallops. When I was in school, I would always just all of my notebooks had sort of this little loopy pattern around all the lines and the top headings and stuff. I don't know why, I just always find this really therapeutic to paint. So of course I felt like I had to incorporate it into a pumpkin, but I'm just gonna go up and down and up and down and make little swoops. There we go, yep. Little swoops all around. And next, to fill in the veins in our sort of glitter ombre pumpkin, gonna do the same thing I did previously, just dabbing little darker blue splotches all down the middle of the veins and up to the top of the pumpkin to give it sort of this glamorous look. Now, I actually wasn't too pleased with the way that my pumpkin turned out for the buffalo check, so I'm going to show you this picture. Go ahead and pause it and you can see which squares should be painted dark blue. There should pretty much be one row of blue and white, and then one row of blue and blue, and then the next row should be blue and white, and then the next row blue and blue. Now for this pumpkin, I'm going to do another sort of navy blue ombre and a color wash, and instead of just having it be all between the shadows, I'm actually going to start with a darker blue up at the top, and I'm going to put a ton of paint up here, and then I'm going to use water to sort of blend it downward so that it's going to be a lot darker up top, and then it's going to be lighter at the bottom. So adding a good healthy layer of dark blue up on the top. And here's where I start to add some of the water. And I'm going to take some of the darker blue downward and just still kind of keep pushing it up so that the darker part of the pumpkin ends up being at the top to create that ombre impression. I also feel like I got a little bit heavy-handed with the paint here, so I'm even going to take my paper towel and sort of blot up some of the lighter or some of the paint just to make it a little bit lighter at the bottom. And then let's go and add a little bit more dark so that it's a little bit more pronounced. And here will be my hydrangea pumpkin. Since it's smaller, we don't need to get super detailed. I'm just going to be painting a bunch of petals in the shape of a circle, a big pom-pom ball of petals. And I'm going to do one big ball here, sort of at the front, and then I'm going to allow a little bit of space between each big pom-pom ball. And then I'm realizing, after this I'm going to go in and fill the space with the light blue color. But for now, here's the navy. Let's go ahead and add another big poofy pom-pom ball, a couple of millimeters away from that, spaced out, closer to the top of the pumpkin. Adding these, keeping the same amount of space in between each one, give or take, just to fill up the rest of the pumpkin like a big poofy hydrangea pattern. this next little guy will end up being gingham, and I'm going to use the navy for this one. And once again, just sort of tracing the veins of the pumpkin and the shape of the pumpkin. If you look at a glass or anything that's round, it's always a little bit, the lines are never really straight across. It's all sort of a curved line. We're just going to follow the curvature of this pumpkin for the vertical lines. And we'll do the same for the horizontal. And again, doing my horizontal lines, just kind of following the curvature of the bottom of the pumpkin is my guide. Not going completely straight across, just kind of a little half moon shape. And as we get all the way up to the top, you can see a fair amount of the other side of the pumpkin. So I'm actually going to use this one to make sort of a circle. You could see a little bit more of the circle going all the way around it. And here we fill in the other rows of our Yayoi Kusama dot pumpkin with the navy. can't tell, I have a thing for lines and checks on my pumpkins. We're going to just make this one a regular blue and white check. Doing horizontal and vertical lines, and then I'm going to fill in every other check with blue. And now for the fun part. I'm using a golden acrylic paint, and I'm going to go and add stems. Now, I recommend using a different brush for this portion because watercolor and acrylic paint don't necessarily get along very well. So I've got a brush that I usually use for my acrylic paint, and I'm going to just go through and I'm going to add the stems and little stem details. Now that these are all done, I'm going to take my light blue color and fill in the spaces around my hydrangea. This is of course an optional step if you like how it's going. Also, in hindsight, I kind of wish I would have added some green leaves. I feel like that's always kind of a nice little extra pop of color, but certainly would never want to stifle your creativity. Please, by all means, feel free to paint as your heart sees fit, but I wanted to add a little blue. And you'll notice too that I'm allowing sort of a white space around hydrangeas. I'm not going all the way in there. I like a little bit of the white space around these flowers. these last details to just about finish it up. Thank you again for joining me on this pumpkin painting adventure. I hope to continue posting these. My plan is to post every week or so. I'll keep you updated as I go. Be sure to like and subscribe for more. Thanks again. Have fun.